Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Michael Williams and I am 42 years old. I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 18 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Ryan Campbell turned into something that still haunts me. And it all started with strange symbols carved into trees and the smell of sulfur in the mountain air. The radio crackled to life at 7:23 p.m. on October 13th, just as the last light was fading behind the Appalachian peaks. I was finishing my evening patrol near Cataract Falls when dispatch came through with a code yellow. Missing hiker. Last seen on the Appalachian Trail section that runs through our most remote wilderness area. Ranger Williams, we have a 29-year-old male, Ryan Campbell, reported missing by his girlfriend. Last contact was via text message at approximately 1600 hours. He was supposed to return to Elkmont Campground by 1800 hours for dinner. Vehicle still at trailhead, no response to cell phone calls. I keyed my radio, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. The October nights in the Smokies were unforgiving, and the temperature was already dropping toward freezing. Copy that, dispatch, ETA to Elkmont Trailhead 20 minutes. Any medical conditions or special circumstances? Negative on medical. Girlfriend states he's an experienced hiker, well-equipped for day hiking. She's concerned because he's never late without calling, and his phone is going straight to voicemail. Weather forecast shows fog rolling in tonight with visibility dropping to near zero. As I drove toward the trailhead, something felt wrong about this call. October 13th. Friday the 13th. In 18 years of park service, I'd learned to pay attention to those little coincidences that seemed to cluster around the worst cases. The Smokies had a dark history, stories that went back generations about things that happened in the deep hollows and hidden valleys where the old mountain families had once lived. I arrived at the Elkmont Trailhead to find Sarah Martinez, Ryan's girlfriend, sitting on the tailgate of Ryan's pickup truck. She was a petite woman in her late 20s with short dark hair and worried eyes. She jumped up when she saw my patrol vehicle approaching. "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "Ryan's been missing for over 3 hours. This isn't like him at all. He's always back when he says he'll be back." I grabbed my pack and emergency gear, checking my radio and GPS unit. "Tell me about his planned route, Sarah. Where was he hiking?" "He wanted to explore some of the old logging roads up near Spence Field," she said, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "He's been researching local history, looking for remnants of the old settlements that used to be up there before the park was established." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The area around Spence Field was notorious among the rangers. We'd had more unexplained disappearances and strange incidents there than anywhere else in the park. The old-timers who'd worked these mountains for decades had stories about that area. Stories they usually only shared after a few drinks, and never in front of tourists. "Did he mention anything specific he was looking for?" I asked. Sarah hesitated, looking uncomfortable. He'd been reading about some kind of religious group that lived up there in the 1800s. He called them the Covenant of the Black Mountain. He said they were some kind of cult that practiced unusual rituals. My blood ran cold. I'd heard whispers of that name before in the old incident reports that were kept locked away in the ranger station files. Reports of missing persons, unexplained deaths, and strange occurrences that went back to the early days of the Park Service. "Sarah, I need you to show me exactly where he parked and which trail he took." She led me to a barely visible path that branched off from the main Appalachian Trail, winding up toward the high ridges where the old settlements had once stood. I examined the area with my flashlight and quickly found Ryan's footprints in the soft earth, size 11 hiking boots with a distinctive tread pattern. "I want you to go back to the ranger station," I told Sarah. "Give them all of Ryan's information and wait there. I'll radio in regular updates." "I want to come with you," she protested. "Absolutely not. This terrain is dangerous at night and I need to move fast. The best thing you can do for Ryan is let me do my job." As Sarah drove away, I began following Ryan's trail up the mountain. The path was treacherous, winding through dense forest and over rocky outcroppings that were slick with evening dew. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the continuing trail of footprints. About 2 miles up the mountain, I found the first sign that something was wrong. Carved into the bark of a massive oak tree was a symbol I'd never seen before. A pentagram enclosed in a circle, with strange runes carved around the perimeter. The carving was fresh, the sap still weeping from the wounds in the bark, but it was what was hanging from the tree that made my stomach lurch. A dead rabbit, gutted and drained of blood, hung from a rope tied around its hind legs. The animal's throat had been cut with surgical precision, and beneath it the ground was stained dark with dried blood. I photographed the scene and radioed it into dispatch. "Base, this is Ranger Williams. I'm about 2 miles up the Spence Field Trail and I've found evidence of unusual activity, possible ritual animal sacrifice. Requesting backup." "Copy that, Williams. Backup is en route. ETA 30 minutes. What's your current status?" "Continuing search for missing hiker. Trail is still visible. We'll maintain radio contact." I pressed on, following Ryan's footprints deeper into the mountains. The forest grew denser and more oppressive as I climbed, and I began to notice more of the carved symbols on trees along the path. Some were fresh, others looked years old, carved so deep into the bark that they'd become part of the tree itself. The smell hit me about a mile further up, sulfur and something else, something sweet and rotten that made my eyes water. It was coming from somewhere ahead, carried on the night wind that whispered through the pines. Ryan's trail led to a clearing I'd never seen before, despite 18 years of patrolling these mountains. In the center of the clearing stood the ruins of what had once been a small church or meeting house. The stone foundation was still intact, but the wooden structure had long since rotted away, leaving only blackened timbers and collapsed walls. But it was what surrounded the ruins that made my blood freeze. Stone altars carved from the native rock were arranged in a perfect circle around the collapsed building. Each altar was stained dark with what looked like dried blood, and atop each one sat the skull of an animal. Deer, bear, wild boar, and others I couldn't identify. Candles burned in iron holders placed between the altars, their flames flickering in the mountain breeze. Someone had been here recently. Someone was still here. I drew my sidearm and called out, "This is Park Ranger Williams. If there's anyone in this area, identify yourself immediately." The only response was the wind through the trees and the crackle of the candle flames. I followed Ryan's footprints to the edge of the clearing, where they ended abruptly at one of the stone altars. His backpack was there, along with his water bottles and hiking poles, but Ryan Campbell was nowhere to be seen. That's when I heard the chanting. It was coming from beneath the ground, muffled but unmistakable. Human voices raised in some kind of ritual incantation. The sound was coming from the ruins of the old building, and as I approached, I could see that what I'd taken for a collapsed floor was actually an opening leading down into the earth. The ruins had been built over a cave system. I radioed dispatch again, but got only static. The mountains were interfering with the signal, cutting me off from backup. I was alone with whatever was happening beneath the ground. The chanting grew louder as I approached the opening. I could make out individual voices now, at least 6 or 7 people, their words in a language I didn't recognize. But beneath the chanting, I heard something that made my heart race. Screaming. Someone was screaming in terror and pain. I descended into the cave system, my flashlight beam revealing a tunnel that had been carved from the living rock. The walls were covered with the same symbols I'd seen on the trees, but these were older, much older. Some looked like they'd been carved centuries ago. The tunnel opened into a large chamber, and what I saw there will haunt me for the rest of my life. 7 people in black robes stood in a circle around a stone altar that had been carved from the cave floor. The altar was stained with fresh blood, and lying on top of it, bound with rope and gagged, was Ryan Campbell. He was alive, but barely. His shirt had been torn away, and his chest was covered with fresh cuts arranged in the same ritualistic patterns I'd seen carved into the trees. His eyes were wide with terror, and he was struggling weakly against his bonds. Standing over him was an 8th figure, a woman in an elaborate headdress made from animal bones and feathers. She held a curved knife in her hands, and as I watched in horror, she raised it above Ryan's chest. "Stop!" I shouted, raising my weapon. "Park service, everyone step away from the altar." The robed figures turned toward me and I saw their faces in the flickering candlelight. They were local people. I recognized several of them from the nearby communities. But their eyes were wrong, completely black, as if their pupils had expanded to fill the entire iris. The woman with the knife spoke, her voice echoing strangely in the cave chamber. "You are too late, Ranger. The harvest moon rises, and the covenant must be fulfilled. The blood of the innocent must be spilled to renew our pact with the Dark Lord." "Like hell," I said, keeping my weapon trained on her. "Release him now, or I will shoot." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You cannot stop what has already begun. The ritual is nearly complete." That's when I noticed the symbols carved into the cave walls were glowing with a faint red light, pulsing in rhythm with the chanting. The temperature in the chamber was rising, and the air itself seemed to thicken with malevolent energy. Ryan was trying to say something around his gag, his eyes desperate. I could see him struggling to communicate, to tell me something important. The woman raised the knife higher, and I made my decision. I fired a warning shot into the cave ceiling, the sound echoing like thunder in the enclosed space. "The next one goes in your chest," I warned. "Step away from him now." Instead of backing down, the cultists began chanting louder, their voices rising to a frenzied pitch. The red glow from the symbols grew brighter, and I could swear I heard something else. A deep, rumbling sound that seemed to come from far beneath the earth. The woman with the knife smiled, revealing teeth that had been filed to points. "You cannot stop the awakening. He has been chosen, marked for sacrifice. His blood will open the gate." I fired again, this time aiming for her shoulder, but the bullet passed right through her as if she were made of smoke. She laughed again, and I realized with growing horror that these weren't just cultists. They were something else, something that had once been human, but was now something far more dangerous. The chanting reached a crescendo, and suddenly the cave was filled with an overwhelming presence. The air grew thick as molasses, and I could feel something ancient and malevolent pressing against my mind, trying to drive me to my knees. But Ryan Campbell was fighting back. Despite his bonds, despite the terror, he was trying to leave a message. I watched as he pressed his bound hands against the stone altar, using his own blood from the cuts on his chest to write something. Letters. He was writing letters in his own blood. SARAHCOVENANT MORGANS HOLLOW. The woman saw what he was doing and shrieked in rage. "Silence him. He must not reveal the sacred places." One of the robed figures struck Ryan across the face, but he kept writing, his movements becoming more frantic. He was running out of time, and he knew it. The knife came down. I lunged forward, but it was too late. The blade pierced Ryan's heart, and his blood flowed across the altar in rivers of red. The symbols on the walls blazed with brilliant light, and the rumbling from beneath the earth became a roar. Something was coming up from the depths of the cave system, something that had been sleeping for centuries, waiting for the right sacrifice to wake it up. I ran. I ran through the tunnel, up out of the cave, across the clearing, and down the mountain trail faster than I'd ever moved in my life. Behind me, I could hear the screams of the cultists and a sound like the earth itself splitting open. When I reached the trailhead, my backup was just arriving. I tried to explain what had happened, but how could I make them understand? A satanic cult performing human sacrifice in a cave system that didn't appear on any park maps. We returned to the clearing with a full search and rescue team, but found nothing. The stone altars were gone, the candles extinguished, the ruins of the old building nothing but a pile of weathered stones. The cave opening had been sealed with a rock slide that looked like it had been there for decades. Ryan Campbell's backpack and hiking gear were still there, but there was no sign of him. No blood, no evidence of the ritual I'd witnessed. The only thing that remained was what Ryan had written on a flat stone near where the altar had been. The same message he'd tried to leave in the cave, carved deep into the rock with what looked like a sharp piece of metal. Sarah Covenant Morgan's Hollow. The official report listed Ryan Campbell as missing, presumed dead due to a hiking accident. The investigation was closed after 2 weeks when no trace of him could be found. Sarah Martinez left the area and never returned. But I knew the truth. Ryan Campbell had been murdered by a satanic cult that had been operating in these mountains for generations, and his final act had been to leave a clue about their location, Morgan's Hollow, a remote valley deeper in the mountains where the old Campbell family, no relation to Ryan, had once lived. I've been researching the area ever since, using old maps and historical records to piece together the truth. The Covenant of the Black Mountain was real, a group of religious extremists who'd fled to the mountains in the 1800s to practice their dark rituals away from civilization. They'd been thought extinct for over a century, but Ryan's disappearance proved they were still active. I found evidence of other disappearances over the years, hikers and campers who'd vanished without a trace in the same general area. All of them had one thing in common. They'd been researching local history, looking for traces of the old settlements. The cult was still recruiting, still practicing their rituals, still making sacrifices to whatever dark power they served, and they were targeting people who got too close to the truth. I've tried to convince my superiors to investigate Morgan's Hollow, but they won't listen. They think I'm traumatized by Ryan's disappearance, that I'm seeing things that aren't there. So I've been conducting my own investigation, hiking deeper into the mountains during my off-duty hours. 3 weeks ago, I found Morgan's Hollow. It's a hidden valley about 15 miles from where Ryan disappeared, accessible only by a series of unmarked trails that wind through the most remote part of the park. The hollow is surrounded by high ridges that block it from view, and in the center stands a compound of buildings that don't appear on any map. I watched the compound through binoculars for hours, and I saw them. Figures in black robes moving between the buildings, tending to what looked like gardens but were actually graveyards. Dozens of graves marked with the same symbols I'd seen in the cave. The cult was still active, still growing, still taking victims. And somewhere in that compound, I was certain, were the remains of Ryan Campbell and all the others who'd disappeared over the years. I've been planning my approach to the compound, waiting for the right moment to gather evidence that will force the authorities to act. But I know I'm running out of time. The cult is aware of my investigation. I've seen their symbols carved into trees near my ranger station, and I've found dead animals on my doorstep. They're coming for me, just as they came for Ryan. But I won't go quietly. I've hidden copies of all my research, all my evidence, in multiple locations. If I disappear, if I end up like Ryan Campbell, the truth will still come out. Someone will find my notes, follow the clues, and expose the Covenant of the Black Mountain for what they really are. Ryan Campbell died trying to warn us about the cult. His message, carved in stone with his dying breath, led me to the truth. And now, if they take me, I'll make sure others can continue the investigation. The harvest moon is rising again. October 13th is approaching, and I can hear them chanting in the darkness, their voices carried on the mountain wind. They're coming for me tonight. But I'll be ready. And if I don't survive, if they drag me down into their caves and spill my blood on their altars, remember this. The Covenant of the Black Mountain is real. They operate out of Morgan's Hollow, 15 miles northeast of Spence Field. They've been killing people for generations, and they'll keep killing until someone stops them. Ryan Campbell tried to warn us. He left us a clue with his dying breath. Now it's up to someone else to finish what he started. The chanting is getting closer. I can see lights moving through the trees, torches carried by robed figures ascending the mountain toward my station. My name is Michael Williams, and I've been a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 18 years. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But the truth lives on. Find Morgan's Hollow. Stop the Covenant. And remember Ryan Campbell, who died trying to save others from the same fate. The door is opening. They're here. Sarah, if you ever read this, Ryan loved you, and his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The Covenant ends now. My name is Carlos Rodriguez, and I am 31 years old. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 6 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Amanda Collins turned into something that still haunts me. The call came in at 3:22 p.m. on November 3rd. when the autumn mist was already beginning to roll in from the Pacific, turning the temperate rainforest into a maze of shadows and whispers. I was completing my weekly trail maintenance report when dispatch crackled through with the kind of urgency that makes every ranger's blood run cold. Ranger Rodriguez, we have a code yellow. Missing person on the Ho River Trail, last seen yesterday evening. I grabbed my emergency pack and headed out immediately. November in Olympic meant unpredictable weather, early darkness, and the kind of bone-deep cold that could kill a lost hiker in one night. The missing person was Amanda Collins, a 26-year-old nurse from Portland who'd been hiking alone. Always a red flag, especially this late in the season. Her boyfriend, Derek Matthews, had driven up from Portland when she failed to check in at their planned time. He met me at the Ho River Visitor Center, pacing nervously beside his Honda Civic. Derek was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of lean build that suggested he spent time outdoors. His dark hair was disheveled and his hands shook slightly as he spoke. "She was supposed to call me last night by 8 p.m., he said, his voice strained. "Amanda never misses a check-in. Never. She's been hiking these trails for years, knows them better than most guides." I reviewed Amanda's hiking permit while Derek provided details. She'd planned a 3-day solo backpacking trip through the Ho River Trail, one of the most beautiful but challenging routes in the park. The trail wound through old-growth forest, across river crossings, and up to alpine meadows that could be treacherous in bad weather. Did she mention meeting anyone else on the trail? Any other hikers or campers? Derek shook his head. She specifically chose this time of year because the trails are less crowded. Amanda likes the solitude, says it helps her think clearly after her shifts at the hospital. I studied the permit more carefully. Amanda had experience. Multiple backcountry trips, proper gear listed, emergency procedures acknowledged. But even experienced hikers could run into trouble. A twisted ankle, a fall, hypothermia from wet clothes and dropping temperatures. "I'll start the search immediately," I told Derek. "We'll find her." I should have known then that some promises are impossible to keep. The Ho River Trail begins in the temperate rainforest, where massive Sitka spruces and western hemlocks create a cathedral of green that blocks out most of the sky. The air is thick with moisture, and everything is covered in a carpet of moss that muffles sound. Beautiful, but also isolating in a way that can play tricks on your mind. I started hiking at 4:15 p.m. following Amanda's planned route. The trail was well maintained but muddy from recent rain, and I could see boot prints that could have been hers, size 7 hiking boots, moderate wear pattern, heading deeper into the forest. I radioed my position every 15 minutes, standard protocol for solo search operations. At mile marker 3.2, I found her first campsite. Amanda had followed proper procedures: bear hang for food, fire ring, waste disposal. But something felt wrong about the scene. The tent was perfectly set up, sleeping bag neatly arranged, but there were no signs of recent occupancy. No wet clothes drying, no personal items scattered around, no indication that someone had actually slept there. I examined the area more carefully with my flashlight. The ground around the tent was disturbed, but not in the way you'd expect from normal camping activities. It looked like someone had deliberately smoothed the earth, covering tracks or drag marks. "Base, this is Rodriguez. I've found what appears to be the subject's first campsite, but there are irregularities. Requesting backup for expanded search." "Copy that, Rodriguez. Weather's deteriorating. We'll have a team to you by Arrow 800 tomorrow. Continue search but maintain safety protocols." I should have turned back then. Should have waited for backup, followed procedure, trusted my instincts about the disturbed ground. But Amanda Collins was out there somewhere, possibly injured, possibly dying from exposure. 6 years of ranger training told me to keep searching. The trail continued deeper into the forest, crossing the Ho River on a suspension bridge that swayed ominously in the wind. The sound of rushing water below was deafening, and the mist rising from the river made visibility poor. I swept my flashlight across the bridge supports, looking for any signs that Amanda had passed this way. That's when I saw him. A figure standing on the far side of the bridge just at the edge of my flashlight beam. Tall, wearing dark clothing, completely motionless. For a moment I thought it might be another hiker, someone who might have seen Amanda. But something about his posture, The way he stood perfectly still while watching me made my skin crawl. "Hello," I called out. "Park Service, I'm looking for a missing hiker." The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, watching. I started across the bridge, my boots echoing on the metal grating. The wind was picking up, making the bridge sway more violently. When I reached the other side, the figure was gone. I swept the area with my flashlight, looking for any sign of where he might have gone. The forest was thick here, plenty of places to disappear quickly, but there should have been some trace. Broken branches, footprints, disturbed undergrowth. Nothing. That's when I heard the screaming. It came from somewhere ahead on the trail, a woman's voice calling for help. High-pitched, desperate, definitely in distress. My training kicked in immediately. Locate the source, assess the situation, provide assistance. "Amanda," I shouted back. "Amanda Collins, I'm a park ranger. Keep calling so I can find you." The screaming continued, but something was wrong with it. It was too consistent, too rhythmic, like someone was screaming at regular intervals rather than in genuine panic. But I had to investigate. If there was even a chance it was Amanda, I couldn't ignore it. I followed the sound deeper into the forest, off the main trail now. The undergrowth was thick, and I had to push through ferns and fallen logs. The screaming was getting closer, but also stranger. Sometimes it sounded like a woman in distress, sometimes like an animal in pain. After 20 minutes of difficult hiking, I found the source. A small clearing about 50 yards off the trail, with a portable speaker hidden in the roots of a massive cedar tree. The screaming was coming from the speaker, playing on a loop. Bait. I'd walked into a trap. The realization hit me the same moment I heard the footsteps behind me. I spun around, hand moving to my radio, but he was already there. The figure from the bridge, close enough now that I could see his face in my flashlight beam. He was maybe 40 years old, average height and build, with the kind of forgettable features that would blend into any crowd. Brown hair, brown eyes, clean-shaven. He could have been anyone, a teacher, an accountant, a friendly neighbor. But his eyes were wrong. Cold, calculating, completely without empathy. "Ranger Rodriguez," he said, and his voice was pleasant, conversational. "I've been expecting you. Who are you? What do you want?" He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Not because it was threatening, but because it was so normal. The smile of someone enjoying a casual conversation. "My name is Thomas Mitchell, and I want to play a game." I reached for my radio, but Thomas held up a hunting knife, military grade, serrated edge, the kind of weapon designed for killing. "I wouldn't do that, Carlos. May I call you Carlos? We're going to be spending some time together." "Where's Amanda Collins?" "Oh, she's safe for now. Whether she stays that way depends entirely on how well you play my game." Thomas gestured with the knife for me to move deeper into the clearing. I could see now that this wasn't a random encounter. He'd prepared this place. A small tent was set up behind some trees, along with camping gear and what looked like medical supplies. This was his hunting ground. "You see, Carlos, I've been watching the Park Service for months, learning your procedures, your response times, your patrol patterns. You rangers are so predictable. Someone goes missing, you come looking, usually alone for the first few hours. Perfect for my purposes." "How many?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Missing persons in Olympic National Park over the past 2 years?" Thomas tilted his head, considering. 7. 3 men, 4 women, all experienced hikers, all alone, all following predictable routes. The Park Service has such a poor closure rate on missing persons cases. So many people just vanish in the wilderness. I felt sick. 7 people, 7 families with no closure, no answers, and I was about to become number 8. "What do you want with me?" The same thing I wanted with all of them. To hunt, to study, to understand what makes people tick when they're facing death. Thomas's smile widened. "But you're special, Carlos. You're not just prey, you're a predator yourself, a hunter. This will be much more interesting than the others." He led me deeper into the forest, the knife always pointed at my back. We walked for what felt like hours, but I tried to keep track of our direction and distance. If I somehow got away, I'd need to find my way back to the trail. Where are we going? To see Amanda, of course. She's been asking for you. We climbed steadily upward, leaving the river valley behind. The forest changed as we gained elevation. Fewer massive trees, more undergrowth, rocky outcroppings that could hide caves or shelters. Thomas moved with confidence, clearly familiar with this terrain. You know, he said conversationally, most people break much faster than I expect. The mind isn't really designed to process genuine mortal terror. It shuts down, goes into shock, becomes compliant, makes the hunt less interesting. Is that what happened to Amanda? Amanda was disappointing. Too much medical training, too logical. She kept trying to analyze the situation, negotiate, find rational solutions. But there is no rational solution to what I do, Carlos. There's only survival or death. We reached another clearing, this one larger and more secluded. Thomas had built a proper camp here. Multiple tents, a fire ring, storage containers, and what looked like a workshop area with tools and equipment. This wasn't temporary. He'd been using this place for months, maybe years. Welcome to my home, Thomas said. I know it's not much, but it serves my purposes. Isolation, no cell service, no chance of rescue. Perfect for extended sessions. That's when I saw Amanda. She was tied to a tree on the far side of the clearing, conscious but clearly in bad shape. Her hiking clothes were torn and dirty, her face was bruised, and she looked like she hadn't eaten in days. But she was alive. Carlos, she said weakly, are you really a ranger? Yes. I'm here to help you. Thomas laughed. Help her? Carlos, you're not here to help anyone. You're here to play my game. The rules are simple. You run, I hunt. If you can evade me for 24 hours, I'll let both of you go. If I catch you... He gestured to a collection of items near his workshop. Personal effects, wallets, jewelry, clothing, trophies from his previous victims. And if I refuse to play, then Amanda dies right now and you die slowly, much more slowly. Thomas's pleasant demeanor dropped for a moment, revealing something predatory underneath. But if you play the game, at least one of you has a chance to survive. I looked at Amanda, then at the trophies from Thomas's other victims. 7 people who'd never made it home. 7 families who'd never gotten closure. The math was brutal but clear. If I ran, if I played his game, Amanda might survive even if I didn't. What's to stop you from killing us both after the 24 hours? Nothing, Thomas admitted. But I give you my word that I'll honor the rules. It's more interesting that way. Besides, what choice do you have? He was right. I could try to fight him now, but he had the knife and the advantage of familiar terrain. Even if I somehow overpowered him, I'd still need to find my way back to the trail with an injured victim. The smart play was to run, try to evade him long enough to find help or turn the tables. When does the game start? Right now. Thomas began counting down from 10. 10, 9, 8. I ran. The forest was treacherous in the dark, full of fallen logs and hidden roots that could break an ankle, but I had advantages Thomas didn't know about. 6 years of hiking these trails, wilderness survival training, and experience reading terrain even in poor visibility. I also had something he didn't expect. I wasn't just running away. I was running toward something. During our hike to his camp, I'd noticed several things. We were about 3 miles from the main trail, northwest of the Ho River. There was a ranger station about 5 miles east, and I knew the terrain well enough to find it even in the dark. If I could reach the station, I could radio for backup and lead a rescue team back to Amanda. But Thomas was hunting me, and he knew these specific woods better than I did. I could hear him moving through the forest behind me, not rushing, not panicking. He was treating this like a job, systematic and patient. I needed to slow him down. The first trap was simple, a deadfall across a game trail I knew he'd likely follow. I wedged a heavy branch between 2 trees and balanced it so that anyone following my footprints would trigger it. Not enough to kill, but maybe enough to injure or delay. 20 minutes later, I heard Thomas cursing in the distance. The trap had worked. I kept moving, using every trick I'd learned in wilderness survival training. False trails, doubled back routes, stream crossings to confuse scent trails. But Thomas was good at this. He'd been hunting people for years and he knew how to read sign and track movement. At 2:17 a.m. he almost caught me. I was crossing a rocky outcrop when I heard the whistle of a knife blade cutting through air. The weapon embedded itself in a tree trunk inches from my head. Thomas emerged from the shadows, moving with predatory grace. "Very good, Carlos. You're making this much more interesting than the others." I grabbed the knife from the tree and backed away, but Thomas was already pulling out another blade. How many weapons was he carrying? "You can't run forever," he said. "This is my territory. I know every trail, every hiding spot, every way in and out. You're just delaying the inevitable." "Maybe, but I'm not the same prey you're used to hunting." I threw the knife at him, not to kill, but to create distance. Thomas dodged easily, but it gave me time to reach the edge of the outcrop. Below was a steep slope covered in loose rock and scrub brush. Dangerous to navigate in the dark, but it would take me toward the ranger station. I went over the edge. The slide down was controlled chaos, bouncing off rocks, grabbing branches to slow my descent, trying to avoid the kind of fall that would break bones. Thomas couldn't follow the same route without risking serious injury, which meant he'd have to find another way down. That bought me time. I reached the bottom with cuts and bruises, but nothing that would slow me down. The ranger station was still 3 miles away, but I knew I could make it. I just had to stay ahead of Thomas long enough to reach the radio. But as I started running again, I heard something that made my blood freeze, screaming, from the direction of Thomas's camp. Amanda was screaming. I stopped, torn between my mission and my duty. The smart thing was to keep running, get help, come back with backup. But Amanda was being tortured right now, and every second I delayed meant more pain for her. Thomas's voice echoed through the forest, amplified somehow. "Carlos, can you hear her? She's asking for you. She wants to know why you abandoned her." It was psychological warfare designed to make me abandon my escape plan. But it was also real. Amanda was suffering, and I was the only person who could help her. I'd taken an oath to protect people, and that oath didn't come with exceptions for personal safety. I turned around and headed back toward the camp. The return trip was faster but more dangerous. Thomas would be expecting me to come back, and he'd be prepared. I needed to approach carefully, assess the situation, find a way to free Amanda without getting both of us killed. But when I reached the camp, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. Thomas was waiting for me, sitting calmly by his fire. Amanda was still tied to the tree, but she wasn't screaming anymore. She was unconscious, hanging limply against her restraints. The screaming had been recorded, another trap. "I told you that you were different from the others," Thomas said without looking up from the fire. "Most people would have kept running. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. But you came back. That's what makes you interesting. Let her go. Your game is with me." "Oh, but it's not just a game anymore, Carlos. It's become something much more fascinating. You see, I've been studying human behavior for years, trying to understand what separates the predators from the prey. And you, my friend, are definitely a predator." Thomas stood up, another knife in his hand. "The question is, which one of us is the better hunter?" The fight was brutal and desperate. Thomas had the advantage of weapons and preparation, but I had training and desperation. We crashed through his camp, scattering equipment and knocking over tents. I managed to get my hands on a camping hatchet, evening the odds slightly. But Thomas was good at this. He'd killed 7 people, and he knew how to use a knife. I was bleeding from multiple cuts and my strength was fading. He was going to win. That's when I heard the helicopters. The sound of rotors echoing off the mountains, getting closer. Rescue teams, search and rescue, maybe even law enforcement. My failure to check in had triggered search protocols. Help was coming. Thomas heard it too. His confident demeanor cracked for the first time, revealing panic underneath. "That's impossible. You couldn't have called for help." "I didn't have to. When a ranger doesn't report in, they send backup. Standard protocol. The helicopters were getting closer, and I could hear voices in the distance. Multiple teams, approaching from different directions. Thomas's isolated hunting ground was about to become a crime scene. "This isn't over," Thomas said, backing toward the tree line. "I'll find you again, Carlos." This was just the beginning. He disappeared into the forest, leaving behind his camp, his trophies, and his latest victim. I rushed to Amanda, cutting her restraints and checking for serious injuries. She was unconscious but breathing, probably drugged. The rescue teams found us 20 minutes later. EMTs stabilized Amanda while search teams combed Thomas's camp, collecting evidence and documenting the scene. The FBI was called in immediately. This was clearly the work of a serial killer. Amanda survived, though she spent weeks in the hospital recovering from dehydration, malnutrition, and psychological trauma. She couldn't remember much about her captivity, which was probably a mercy. The physical injuries healed, but the mental scars would take longer. Thomas Mitchell was never found. The FBI investigation revealed that he'd been using the Olympic National Park as a hunting ground for at least 3 years, possibly longer. DNA evidence from his camp was linked to 5 of the 7 missing persons cases, confirming what I already knew. He was responsible for multiple murders. But Thomas had escaped, and he was still out there. The FBI believed he'd moved to a different hunting ground, possibly another national park with similar terrain and low law enforcement presence. They warned rangers across the Pacific Northwest to be alert for missing persons cases that didn't follow normal patterns. I returned to duty 3 weeks later, but everything was different. I couldn't look at the forest the same way anymore. Every lone hiker was a potential victim. Every missing person case was potentially connected to Thomas. The wilderness I'd loved and protected for 6 years had become a hunting ground for a predator who knew how to use isolation and fear as weapons. 6 months later, I transferred to a different park. Olympic held too many memories of that night, too many reminders of what I'd seen and done. Amanda sent me a letter thanking me for saving her life, but I knew the truth. I'd failed. Thomas had escaped, and he was still hunting. The worst part wasn't the physical injuries or the psychological trauma. It was the knowledge that I'd become part of his game. He'd studied me, learned my patterns, used my own instincts against me, and he'd promised to find me again. Sometimes late at night I wonder if he's kept that promise, if he's out there somewhere, watching, waiting for the right moment to finish what he started. The FBI says it's unlikely. Serial killers rarely follow their victims to new locations. But Thomas wasn't like other killers. He was patient, methodical, and he saw hunting as an art form. Amanda Collins recovered and returned to her job as a nurse in Portland. She became an advocate for wilderness safety, working with park services to improve search and rescue protocols. She never went hiking alone again. Thomas Mitchell remains at large. The FBI has him on their most wanted list, and there have been reported sightings in at least 6 different states. But he's never been caught, and missing persons cases with similar patterns continue to appear in national parks across the country. I still work as a park ranger, but now I carry more than standard equipment. I've trained with firearms, hand-to-hand combat, and advanced survival techniques, because I know that someday Thomas might come back to finish his game. And when he does, I'll be ready. But until that day comes, I'll keep doing my job, protecting people, searching for the missing, and hoping that no other ranger has to face what I faced in the forests of Olympic National Park, because there are predators in the wilderness and they don't all walk on 4 legs. The mountains don't forgive mistakes, but some predators never forget their prey. My name is Douglas Mitchell and I am 34 years old. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 9 years. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Rebecca Turner turned into something that still haunts me. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on October 13th, a date that would forever be burned into my memory. I was finishing up paperwork at the Hurricane Ridge Ranger Station when the radio crackled to life with a voice I didn't recognize. Any ranger, this is Rebecca Turner. I'm lost somewhere in the Solduke area. My GPS isn't working and I can see fires in the distance. Strange fires. Please, someone help me. The transmission cut to static, then silence. I grabbed my radio immediately. Rebecca Turner, this is Ranger Douglas Mitchell. Can you hear me? What's your location? Nothing but static. Control, this is Mitchell at Hurricane Ridge. Did you copy that transmission from Rebecca Turner? Negative, Mitchell. We didn't receive any transmission. Are you requesting assistance? That was odd. Radio signals could be tricky in the mountains, but if I'd received it clearly, the base station should have picked it up too. I tried calling Rebecca Turner again, but got no response. Rebecca Turner. The name was familiar, and after checking the missing persons database, I found her file. 26 years old, solo hiker, reported missing 3 days ago by her sister. She'd been planning a week-long backcountry trip in the Solduke area. Search teams had been looking for her for 2 days with no luck, but now she'd made contact, and she was alive. I grabbed my emergency pack and headed out into the October night. The Solduke area was a 40-minute drive from Hurricane Ridge through winding forest roads that became treacherous in the dark. As I drove, I kept trying to raise Rebecca on the radio, but got only static. The mention of fires troubled me. There were no authorized campfires in that area, and the Park Service hadn't issued any burn permits. Illegal camping was one possibility, but something about her voice, the fear in it, suggested something worse. I reached the Solduke trailhead parking area just after midnight. Rebecca's car was there, a blue Toyota Camry with Washington plates. I did a quick inspection, doors locked, no signs of disturbance. Her camping permit was still on the dashboard, indicating she'd planned to hike the Solduke River Trail to the hot springs. I strapped on my headlamp and started up the trail, my portable radio clipped to my shoulder. The October night was crisp and clear, with a full moon casting silver light through the towering Douglas firs and western hemlocks. Under normal circumstances, it would have been beautiful. But something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No owl calls, no rustling of small animals, no sound of wind through the trees. Just the crunch of my boots on fallen leaves and the distant murmur of the Solduke River. I'd been hiking for about 20 minutes when I smelled it. Wood smoke, heavy and acrid, with an undertone of something else. Something that made my stomach turn. Following the scent, I left the main trail and pushed through dense undergrowth. The smell grew stronger and I began to see a faint orange glow through the trees ahead. As I got closer, I could hear voices, low, rhythmic chanting that seemed to echo through the forest. I crept to the edge of a natural clearing, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. 7 figures in dark robes stood in a circle around a massive bonfire. Their faces were hidden by hoods, but I could see their hands clearly, pale, long-fingered, moving in precise gestures as they chanted in a language I didn't recognize. The fire itself was wrong somehow, burning too bright, too hot, with flames that seemed to reach higher than physics should allow, and tied to a wooden post in the center of the circle was Rebecca Turner. She was alive but barely conscious, her head lolling to one side. Her hiking clothes were torn and dirty, and I could see cuts on her arms and face. Around her neck hung a crude wooden symbol, an inverted pentagram carved with symbols that seemed to writhe in the firelight. The chanting grew louder, more urgent. One of the robed figures approached Rebecca, holding a long curved knife that gleamed in the firelight. The blade was ornate, covered in symbols that matched the ones on Rebecca's necklace. I keyed my radio as quietly as possible. Control, this is Mitchell. I have a code red situation at my location. I need immediate backup in County Sheriff's Department. Multiple suspects armed and dangerous with a hostage. Static. I tried again, but the radio was completely dead. Not even static now, just silence. The figure with the knife began to speak, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing. Great Lord of Darkness, we offer this sacrifice to you on this sacred night. Accept her blood as payment for the power you have granted us. Accept her soul as tribute to your eternal reign. The other figures responded in unison. Hail Satan, hail the Dark Lord, hail the Prince of Lies. I had to act fast. Rebecca was about to be murdered, and I was the only one who could save her. I counted the figures again. 7 total, all focused on the ritual. I had my service weapon and the element of surprise. I stood up, gun drawn, and stepped into the clearing. "Federal Park Ranger, everyone step away from the woman and put your hands where I can see them." The reaction was immediate and terrifying. All 7 figures turned toward me in perfect unison, their movements synchronized like puppets on strings. In the firelight, I could see their faces now. Pale, gaunt, with eyes that reflected the flames like an animal's. The one with the knife smiled, revealing teeth that had been filed to points. "Ranger Douglas Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying an accent I couldn't place. "We've been expecting you." "How do you know my name?" "The Dark Lord sees all, knows all. He told us you would come, just as he told us where to find Rebecca Turner. Just as he told us you would be perfect for our purposes." The other figures began to move, spreading out to surround me. I kept my gun trained on the one with the knife, but I was badly outnumbered. "Let the woman go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is between you and me." "Oh, but it's not between us at all, Ranger Mitchell. You see, we need you both. The ritual requires 2 sacrifices, one willing, one unwilling. Rebecca Turner came to us willingly, drawn by the dreams we sent her. You, on the other hand, I came here to help her. She's not here willingly." The leader laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Ask her yourself." Rebecca Turner raised her head, and I saw that her eyes were completely black. No whites, no iris, just solid black orbs that seemed to absorb light. "I've been waiting for you, Douglas," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "I called you here. I brought you to us." "The radio transmission," I whispered, "was sent by our dear Rebecca, yes. She's been one of us for 3 days now, ever since she stumbled into our sacred grove. The Dark Lord has claimed her, body and soul, and now he wants you." The figures were closing in, and I realized I was trapped. Behind me was dense forest, in front of me was the fire, and the cultists were moving to cut off any escape routes. "What do you want?" I asked. "We want you to join us, Ranger Mitchell. We want you to accept the Dark Lord into your heart and become one of his chosen. We want you to help us spread his influence throughout these mountains. And if I refuse? Then you'll burn in the sacred fire and your death will feed our master's power. Either way, you're not leaving this clearing." The leader raised his knife, and I knew I had to move. I fired 3 shots center mass, but the bullets seemed to pass right through him. He didn't even flinch. "Iron cannot harm the servants of darkness, Ranger Mitchell. We are beyond your mortal weapons now." 2 of the cultists grabbed my arms before I could fire again. Their grip was incredibly strong, and their skin was ice cold even through my jacket. They dragged me toward the fire, and I could feel the heat searing my face. "Hold him still," the leader commanded. "The Dark Lord wishes to speak with him directly." They forced me to my knees in front of the fire. The leader began chanting again, and the flames grew higher, taking on a greenish tint that hurt to look at. In the heart of the fire, I could see shapes moving, dark figures that seemed to be made of shadow and flame. "Look into the fire, Ranger Mitchell. See the truth of what we serve." I tried to look away, but one of the cultists grabbed my head and forced me to stare into the flames. The shapes became clearer, more defined. I could see horned figures dancing in the fire, their eyes glowing red, their mouths open in silent screams. And then I heard a voice speaking directly into my mind. "Welcome, Douglas Mitchell, I have been waiting for you." The voice was like molten metal, burning through my thoughts. I could feel it trying to burrow into my consciousness, to take control of my mind the way it had taken control of Rebecca Turner. "You will serve me," the voice continued. "You will help my children spread throughout these mountains. You will bring me more souls to corrupt." "Go to hell," I managed to say. The voice laughed. "Hell is where I reign, mortal, and hell is where you will spend eternity if you do not submit to me." The cultists began chanting louder, and I felt something cold and dark trying to force its way into my mind. My vision began to blur. and I could feel my will slipping away. But then I remembered something my grandmother had taught me when I was a child. She'd been a devout Christian, and she'd always said that evil had no power over those who truly believed in the light. I began to pray silently at first, then out loud. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The cultists hissed and stepped back, their grips loosening on my arms. "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters." The fire began to flicker, the green light fading. "He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake." The voice in my head screamed in rage and pain. The cultists were backing away, their faces twisted in agony. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." I broke free from their grip and ran toward Rebecca Turner. She was still tied to the post, but her eyes were no longer black. They were blue again, filled with confusion and terror. "Douglas, what's happening? Where am I?" "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." I cut her bonds with my knife and helped her to her feet. The cultists were writhing on the ground now, their robes smoldering as if they were burning from within. "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." The fire began to collapse, the flames dying down to normal orange and yellow. The dark shapes in the fire were gone, replaced by ordinary logs and embers. "You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." We ran toward the tree line, but the leader of the cult wasn't finished. He rose from the ground, his face now revealed as a mass of scars and burns, his eyes glowing red. "You cannot escape the Dark Lord's will," he screamed. "He has marked you both. You will never be free. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life." We plunged into the forest, branches tearing at our clothes and faces. Behind us, I could hear the cultists screaming, their voices inhuman now, like the cries of wild animals. "And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." The forest fell silent. We ran for what felt like hours, crashing through underbrush and stumbling over fallen logs. Rebecca was weak from her ordeal, and I had to support her most of the way. Finally, we reached the main trail and I could see the lights of the parking area ahead. "My car," Rebecca gasped. "The keys are in my pocket." We reached her Toyota and I helped her into the passenger seat. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As we drove away, I looked back at the forest and saw a red glow on the horizon, the cultists' fire, still burning. "Douglas," Rebecca said quietly, "what happened to me? I remember hiking to the hot springs and then nothing. Just darkness and cold and voices whispering in my head." "You were taken by some very bad people," I said. "But you're safe now." Were they actually worshiping? "I don't know what they were worshiping," I lied. "But it's over now." We drove in silence for a while, but I could feel Rebecca watching me. "You saved me," she said finally. "How did you know where to find me?" I thought about telling her the truth, that she'd called me on the radio, that she'd been used as bait to lure me into the cultists' trap. But she'd been through enough trauma already. Just lucky, I guess. We reached the ranger station just as the sun was coming up. I called for medical assistance and backup, though I wasn't sure what I was going to tell them. Who would believe a story about Satan worshippers in the Olympic National Forest? The investigation that followed was thorough, but ultimately fruitless. Search teams found the clearing where the ritual had taken place, but it was empty. No trace of the cultists, no evidence of the fire, nothing but a circle of scorched earth and some strange symbols carved into the trees. Rebecca Turner was treated for dehydration and exposure, but physically she was fine. Psychologically, she had no memory of the 3 days she'd been missing. The doctors said it was probably traumatic amnesia, a defense mechanism to help her cope with whatever had happened. But I knew the truth. The darkness had tried to claim her, and somehow, by the grace of God, we'd both escaped. The official report listed the incident as a case of temporary abduction by unknown persons, possibly a survivalist group or religious cult. The FBI investigated for several weeks but found no leads. Eventually, the case was closed as unsolved. But I knew they were still out there somewhere in the vast wilderness of the Olympic Peninsula, and I knew they weren't finished with me. 3 weeks after the incident, I found something tucked under the windshield wiper of my truck, a piece of bark with symbols carved into it, the same symbols I'd seen on Rebecca's necklace and in the clearing. Below the symbols, scratched in crude letters, was a message. The Dark Lord remembers. The Dark Lord waits. You cannot hide from his servants forever. I burned the bark immediately, but the message was clear. The cult was still active, still watching, still waiting for another chance to complete their ritual. I requested a transfer to a different park, but the nightmares followed me. Every night I dreamed of the clearing, the fire, the voices chanting in that unknown language. I dreamed of Rebecca Turner with her black eyes, calling my name through the radio. And sometimes in the deepest part of the night, I swear I can still hear that voice in my head. The voice from the fire, promising me power and eternal life if I would just submit to its will. 6 months later, I left the Park Service altogether. The mountains held too many dark secrets, and I'd seen enough of them to last a lifetime. I took a job in the city, working security for an office building, surrounded by steel and concrete and electric lights. But even there, I'm not safe. Last week I found another piece of bark on my apartment door. The same symbols, the same message. They followed me to the city, and they're not going to give up. Rebecca Turner sends me Christmas cards every year, always with a note thanking me for saving her life. She's doing well, she says. She's married now, with a baby on the way. She's moved to the East Coast, as far from the Olympic Peninsula as she can get. But I know something she doesn't know. In her last Christmas card, there was a photo of her family. Her husband is a nice-looking man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Her baby is beautiful and healthy. But in the background of the photo, barely visible in the shadows, is a figure in a dark robe. And if you look closely, you can see symbols carved into the tree behind them. The same symbols I saw in the clearing that night. The darkness never really lets go of the people it's touched. It just waits, patient and eternal, for the right moment to reclaim what it considers its own. I've been carrying a small silver cross ever since that night, and I read the Bible every day. I've become a regular at the local church, and I've told the pastor my story. He believes me, and he's been helping me strengthen my faith. But faith isn't armor, and prayer isn't a weapon. The darkness is still out there, still growing, still spreading through the forests and mountains like a cancer. And somewhere in the wilderness, the devil's congregation continues its work, adding new members to their ranks and preparing for the day when they can complete the ritual they started. I know they're coming for me. I can feel them getting closer every day. The symbols appear in new places, scratched into my car, carved into the sidewalk outside my apartment, burned into the windows of buildings I pass. And sometimes, late at night, I can hear them chanting. But I'm not the same man who stumbled into that clearing 9 months ago. I'm stronger now, more prepared. I've learned to fight back against the darkness, to stand firm in the light. When they come for me, and they will come, I'll be ready. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For he is with me, and the darkness cannot overcome the light.